And Melissa, you are good to go.
Great. Thank you so much, Alex. So, as Alex said, my name is Melissa Bush. I am the School Safety Emergency Management Regional Coordinator for the beautiful area of Eastern Oregon, which covers 8 different counties: Baker, Grant, Harney, Malheur, Morrow, Umatilla Union, and Wallowa. Before I had this role, I have been a teacher for a couple of decades. I taught in Wallowa and Beaverton school districts, but primarily I've been involved with international education and have taught in 8 different countries. So I was particularly interested in this topic because for me, special events has always been just this amazing part of a school culture and environment that brings together everyone for building memories and relationships. But I do know they are super stressful and so important to get right. Over the years, I've experienced some special events that maybe could have gone better. I think back to when I was in a Brazilian school, or international school in Brazil. We had an international food fair. And so you had different booths, and they were very close together. And one country was boiling something, deep frying a food item, and it splashed onto the next booth, causing some problems and perhaps a little bit dangerous. And then this led to an altercation and ultimately led to these two countries tearing each other's booths down. And then, oh, I've had another event where there was open house in Ecuador where a divorced couple got into a fist fight. And then there was a graduation ceremony in Zambia where a sudden wind whipped up and knocked over the trophy table and it damaged some of the trophies. So I don't know if we could have prevented the fist fight, but at least for the other two, had there been some more planning, those situations might have completely been avoided. We would have weighted down the table so the trophies wouldn't break. With the case of the food stalls, they could have been more separation between them. Is frying things in deep fat, is that a good idea? And then, of course, should those two countries have been stationed next to each other? So at this time of the year, we're always thinking about graduation and the procession. So this is our procession point. And if you would, could you please drop in the chat any school-wide special event that you've attended or planned in your personal or professional life? So I'm not totally sure if I can actually see the chat.
Melissa getting a lot of graduations and prom,
Oh,
track
okay.
meets.
Thank you. Thanks. That's going to help me. Yeah, so we've all been to them ourselves, or we've been organizing them or helping with them. As you're thinking about them, were there any of them that you would have wanted a do-over? And it's possible there's always things that we can do better with a special event. And so that leads us to this topic for today, our task and the objectives to meet that task, because we want to develop and implement a comprehensive safety and emergency response plan for an all-school hosted special event: graduations, sporting events, festivals, and more. So there's 5 basic objectives when you're thinking about that. Number one, you're building a foundation for planning events, more like planning for planning. Number two, to determine mitigation strategies with a planning committee. The third one is to create event action plans, EAPs, with timelines. 4, apply incident management techniques as they relate to special events. And then lastly, to create resiliency, redundancy through post-event and incident reviews. Okay. Within the event, you might have issues, disruptions, catastrophes. There's minor ones. Small problems are common and expected. But there are big problems. These are rare, but especially with good planning and backup plans. Then when you think specifically to schools, to large school gatherings, issues, disruptions, and catastrophes typically break down into these categories according to incident IQ. About 5 to 10%, there might be medical emergencies. Then we move to fights or physical altercations. Now, according to this study, that's about 1 in 50. But anecdotally, with all of my colleagues, we think that it might actually be more than that. And then severe weather-related evacuations. We're thinking about things like this quite frequently. It seems there are more weather-related items. I know in my hometown back in Monett, Missouri, this past week, there was an elementary school play, and very rarely do tornadoes occur in the morning, but this one did. And the play was being held in a room where there were a lot of windows. So the attendees, the kids in the play, all had to be evacuated to an area without windows, as you typically find in Midwestern towns. So they were down in the basement. So it got delayed, but then it was further delayed because there were power lines out. So this is something that that does occur, the weather evacuations. And then, of course, although they are extremely rare, active threats of violence are, can occur. But the perceived risk, although they're rare, the perceived risk is really strong and what people have in the back of their minds when they attend large events. So this necessitates more visible security to assure everyone and to proceed with an event. Okay, let's go to those objectives. The first one is building a foundation for planning events, the planning before the planning. When you're getting ready for that event, you want to think about who are all the stakeholders and partnerships that are going to be there, the public and the private. Because when you're working with event, when you first conceived about it, maybe you have one view of it, but the other stakeholders are going to have other views. What are their major concerns? What would they do in the event of an incident? How can they help? And how are you going to communicate and collaborate? When you start thinking and brainstorming of all the people that you could possibly have, it could be students, families, and administration and staff of a hosting school. If you are doing for example, a large sporting tournament, then that's also going to involve the student staff, coaches of another school, transportation, their families. When you think about graduations, there might be guest speakers, VIPs. Talent events would involve judges and officiants. Then you go into such organizations that's going to be there to help: emergency services, first responders, mental health officials. And then also you have your public services such as water provision with, for example, the food fair, or electricity, as in the case I was talking about with the play, that electricity wasn't, problems were involved. You have contractors that set up events or that set up the venues, vendors that are going to provide food. What are the concerns of all these different people? Now, that's a lot of different people to try to get to the table at the same time, but is it possible to get people representing these different stakeholders when you start planning the event? And this leads us to the FEMA P for building a foundation for planning events. And you can see that it's a P, but we've also got a little leg tacked on here to make it an R for the review section of it. So event action plans, EAPs, are longer ranging than an incident action plan, which is when something can go wrong. And they'll encompass many different groups. The FEMA P for planning. So following this system will ensure productive planning. Now, when you're thinking of event, Look at the white box. That's the when the event begins. So you want to think with that in mind. But you're actually going to be starting over here where the orange arrow is, the planning before the planning. Also be thinking of timelines. They're super important as when you want these different steps to occur so that you move along with the planning and preparation. There are 5 major aspects to the planning before the planning, building the foundation. You want to think first about time. There's different aspects of time. For example, the time of year will influence your event. Weather, whether it's a hot day and you're going to need hydration issues, or a cold day, or cold weather, or storm weather. It's also time of the day, for example, whether it's a daytime event or an evening event. Your law enforcement stakeholders are going to be able to inform you about, for example, if there are traffic concerns. For my son's graduation coming up next week in Northfield, Minnesota, there's a Malt-O-Meal cereal company there, or factory. Over the years, the graduation committee has had to consult with them because there's times when it's very loud. And so they want to shut down production, for example, when speeches are going to be delivered. When you're planning an event, what's going on in the community? Are there, for example, flight paths that you would want to avoid the timing of a speech when there's going to be environmental noise? The second one is space. How much space is it for the event? Is it confined? Is it outdoors? Where will the boundaries be? How will the boundaries be guarded? Is it enough space for possible attendees, or are you going to have booths too close, as in the event with my food festival? What about parking? How accessible is it for those with access issues? A third concern are crowd dynamics. Is this a somewhat solemn occasion, such as a graduation, or is it a boisterous sporting event? How will it influence the environment around the event, or vice versa? In Zimbabwe, we had a basketball tournament, for example, and we got into trouble with the neighborhood because of the vuvuzelas, which are those loud trumpets that people play sometimes at sporting events. It upset neighborhood dogs, and also a nearby nursing home had complaints. So all of those are factors to take into account. What is the crowd dynamics? Number 4, information and communication systems. Of course, this could be an entire webinar in itself because you're thinking about how will the different stakeholders communicate with each other? How is communication going to go out beforehand? What is the signage at the event? What languages? What info will go out in the event of an incident? You know, if you have to change venues because of weather, for example, will it be through an announcement? Will it be through a telephone system? Do you have templates to follow beforehand to speed the delivery? All of these are just enormous factors. But if you think about it in the planning stages, these apply to all of those different topics. What's the function of that communication? Does it serve your needs? Is it simple? Is it clear? Then lastly, the incident command system. This is the FEMA recommended chain of command in which an individual answers to one person in charge, and we'll discuss that a little bit more in a moment. Okay, step 2, risk identification and mitigation. Okay, there's me. It actually looks like me. This is me the night before an event, thinking of all the things that could go wrong the next day. However, if you follow these steps, this will still be you awake, but it's going to happen long before. weeks before the event because the team of stakeholders has already been planning and preparing for this possible incidents by following this flow chart. What's the function of the event and the venue? What are you trying to do? What incidents could arise? And remember, this is coming from a wide perspective of the different stakeholders. It's not just you trying to hold everything in your head. The third, what are going to be the consequences of these incidents? And then lastly, what are the contingency plans to prevent the incidents or to minimize the consequences? And rather than letting your mind just ping pong through a random collection of possible incidences, you can categorize them into these 4 areas, which will help the stakeholders determine how much energy and how much planning should be devoted to it. So in the first box, you have high likelihood, low consequence. For example, rain at an outdoor graduation. This is a high likelihood of something happening. The means to deal with that would be to transfer. You're going to transfer the location. You're going to transfer the time of the start. It's something that will just have to change. The next category is high likelihood, high consequence. And the means of mitigation for this is to avoid. These are the things that are likely to happen. Cables, cords that need to be fastened and secured. Areas where where they shouldn't be. They need to be boundaries marked. People confused about where to go. Make the signage. I think we've all held our breath as high school graduates walk across the stage in new shoes. Maybe they should be worn to practice walking in those shoes or avoid super high heels. Low likelihood, low consequence. These are the things that we're just going to have to accept that might happen. This is the case of computer technology glitches, microphones going out, the things that might happen, a certain type of food running out at a vendor event, for example. For the particular group or team that's dealing with that particular area, that's going to be their issue and how they deal with it. So these things might happen and we have to accept it. And the last is the low likelihood but high consequence. These are the things that we have to prepare for and hope that they do not happen and reduce the possibility of them happening if something did occur to control the situation. This is another area which could be an entirely separate seminar. Let's go to 3, event action planning. And now we arrive at the command and general staff meeting where we follow the FEMA chain of command. You have an incident commander, for example, a principal, and then create divisions, groups, teams under that to supervise the various aspects of an event. Every worker within those divisions answers to that one person in charge of that division so that the incident commander, the principal, is not running around putting out all of the fires. This is going to avoid confusion and streamline decision making. Just before that, also, with a little bit of common sense, use plain English and avoid jargon. For example, if you always refer to a particular field as the outback, not everyone's going to know where the outback is. So make sure that everyone can understand. And in these meetings, then that would be determined as part of your event action program or plan. Underneath that, let's take a look at span of control. Whoops, I just went too fast. Coming back, there we go. So the span of control is a concept that describes the appropriate ratio of people supervised per supervisor, commonly around 3 to 7 people, but it can't be too many because there's only so much that you can control. Unified command also refers to the multiple agencies in collaboration together. These are all of your stakeholders working together to make sure that the objective of the event goes well and is happy. A great event. Also, keep in mind that, especially at a smaller school, there might be individuals wearing more than one hats. Just because you were up early in the morning, being one of the people to make sure the signage is in place, does not mean that later in the day you might be working with crowd control. So make sure that if a person is in charge of one event, they will have a different command person for that than they would for the second event or the second responsibility. Let's move to this area, strategies and tactics to meet the objectives. Okay, for each different part of a special event, there's objectives. You want the sound systems to work well, for example. You want it to be a wonderful graduation. That's, for example, the overall objective. To meet those, there are different ways that you can meet them. There's three levels. Now, let's take in mind the thing that's very, very important, which is security measures to ensure a safe event, like a safe graduation. That's your objective. Your strategies are how you're going to meet that, what technique, and then the tactics are the actual actions of that strategy. Okay? So your objective, say, is to make sure that everything is safe. A defensive is a very strong one. You're going to see this at massive concerts where there might be security dogs, security officers, plainclothes detectives. That's a very high level. Is that appropriate to your event? And then it might be at the offensive level, more medium. Are there people that check you in at the event? Are they doing a wand over you? Are you checking your bags? But maybe your security level is pretty low and it's going to be passive with boundary guardrails and signage. You decide with your stakeholders what are the different levels of strategies and tactics to meet the objectives. Finally, planning. You're almost there. This is the stage at which you are going to prepare to meet. You will want to have all of the paperwork done, the parking layout, the chain of command of who is in charge of what and their numbers, all of the signage. These things are being prepared. Then you start your event planning meetings. There will probably be one or more, depending on the scalability of the event. Okay? And then you're going to create an event action plan with an approval of the stakeholders. Then there will be continued briefing, checklists, and adjustments. This is almost a loop of this top part of the P that you are completing to keep the event going. Now, what if an incident does occur and you need to make the transition from an event to an incident? So normally maybe things are ticking along according to the event plan, but then an incident occurs. Because your team has been prepared for the possibility of something going wrong, you're just now going to transition to your contingency plans. Let me give you the example of when I got married. All my dad had to do was to make sure that he had a white shirt that was hanging on the back of a closet door to take with him to go with his tux. But he forgot it. And so he thought he was going to just wear a red t-shirt under his tux and that no one would notice. However, my older brother had a contingency plan. He had gone to a Walmart, purchased a cheap shirt. He had it there waiting for my dad. My dad slipped into the shirt. The event continued. The bride never knew anything about it until afterwards. Now, that's a very trivial example, but you can see that there was an immediate problem, a recovery. The event continues with the least disturbance of all. Let's take a look at those 3 steps when you're thinking about an event. If you look at the pictures, you can see the situation of a mother looking for someone. Let's say she's lost her child at an event. She has looked around, she's asked people around her, she's looking for someone identified with the event so that she can report the situation. So there would be the person in charge, perhaps, of ushers or people that the first responders. There would be the awareness of the situation and appropriate communication for that division. Then there would be the step of recovery, the adequate and appropriate resources and responders. They communicate to look for a small child, and the immediate threat to life, property, environment subsides. The necessary communication is in effect. And 3, the event continues with minimum disruption to the event. You've recovered your physical or structural harm, the emotional or psychological harm, or the business or organizational issues. Again, this could be an entire webinar in itself that we would be happy to consult with from our team. Okay, 5. Phew, the event is over and it's gone well, or the problems have been taken care of. There are 3 sections for follow-up. And this is where the review of the event actually just becomes part of the preparation for the next event, because I think we've all been in situations with planning an event, you get through with it, you're glad, you talk a little bit about it, but then the next day you're back at school and you have the next fires to put out, the next event, the next thing that you need to do. And the event becomes kind of a distant memory until it's time. All of a sudden, it's March or April, and you're planning, example, graduation again. So here's 3 steps to follow. First of all, and I've always loved this term, hot wash. This is the after party, if you will, when you get the lowdown immediately after the event is over. I find a great recommendation is to start when you start asking people, asking volunteers, people involved, the stakeholders, how things went, start at the bottom for the people in the nitty-gritty, the students, the volunteers, the people working at the base. For one thing, you're going to get a different perspective. The other idea is if you start at the top, and you ask that person and they say, yes, everything went great, and then you go to the person underneath them, they're not going to be as willing to tell you that things did not go as well if their supervisors already told you that it was wonderful. Now, the thing that always comes to mind for me for situations like that is a carnival that was at our school in Ecuador. Okay, if I went to the people in charge of the tickets, they would say, this was a super event. We made so much money. However, I also went to the volunteers working with it. They would tell you that there were some issues. The teenage volunteers, instead of using whipping cream, they decided to put on menthol shaving cream. And then when the little kids did the pie in the face, they got menthol in their eyes. It was stinging them. They had to go to first aid to get it washed out. So, and of course, that situation was remedied, but the people taking the money in didn't have that perspective. Step 2 would be the after review, where you're going to meet either with as many stakeholders as you can, getting to the same table at the same time, or possibly also separate from each other so that they all get their perspectives. So can take quite a bit of time, and depending on how much effort you want to, depending on if this event is going to be something that you build on and build on from year to year. And 3, written reports, the ultimate written reports, so that you have this documentation for the next time. The ultimate question is, were we good or were we just lucky? So at this point, I'd like to tell you that we are here to help. If you would want more information or assistance in planning special events, any of your regional coordinators would be happy to work with you on this. This is going to be the end of the recording session, but then we're going to move out into a breakout scenario that I really hope that you'll stay involved for.